After dedicating 25 years to building my catering business from a small home kitchen to a renowned culinary empire, I never imagined my own daughter Alexandra would strike my name from her wedding guest list. I'd raised her as a single parent, after her father abandoned us, pouring everything into giving her a stable life. But once she became engaged to the son of a prominent political family, suddenly my working-class background became something to hide. What Alexandra didn't realize was that Harrington Manor, the exclusive historical estate where she desperately wanted to host her perfect wedding, had been quietly purchased and renovated by me 3 years earlier. A business investment I'd kept private even from my immediate family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation fiasco began on a crisp autumn morning. I was in the industrial kitchen of my main catering facility, testing a new Mediterranean-inspired menu with my head chef when my phone buzzed with a text from my younger sister, Diane. "Have you received Alexandra's wedding invitation yet? The design is gorgeous, letterpress on handmade paper, very elegant." My heart sank. Alexandra had announced her engagement to Connor Blackwell 6 months earlier, but our conversations about wedding plans had been surprisingly vague. Whenever I offered catering services or venue suggestions, she would quickly change the subject or make non-committal responses. At first, I attributed her evasiveness to the natural stress of wedding planning, but Diane's message confirmed my growing suspicions. "No invitation yet," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Maybe it got lost in the mail?" Diane's response was immediate. "Oh, I'm sure it's coming. Probably just a mail delay." But we both knew better. Alexandra was deliberately excluding me from her wedding, a realization that felt like a physical blow. I excused myself from the kitchen, retreating to my office where I could process this betrayal privately. Through the window, I watched my staff efficiently preparing for weekend events, the business I had built from nothing now employing over 60 people across 3 locations. That evening, as I was reviewing quarterly projections at my modest kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Alexandra with her homework throughout her childhood, my phone rang. It was Connor's mother, Elizabeth Blackwell, a woman I had never spoken with despite her son's engagement to my daughter. "Ms. Rivera? This is Elizabeth Blackwell, Connor's mother." Her voice carried the polished accent of old money and private education. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I replied, closing my laptop. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Blackwell?" "It's about the wedding venue. Alexandra mentioned you're in the catering business and might have connections. We've had a terrible disappointment. Our original venue double-booked our date, and with only 3 months until the wedding, we're desperate to find somewhere suitable. Alexandra has her heart set on Harrington Manor, but they're notoriously exclusive." The irony of her call was almost too perfect. 3 years earlier, I had purchased the declining Harrington estate through a holding company, renovating it into one of the region's most sought-after event venues. I maintained separate management for the property and kept my ownership private, a business strategy that allowed me to expand without tying my personal brand too closely to any single property. "Harrington Manor is certainly beautiful," I responded carefully, wondering if Alexandra had put her future mother-in-law up to this call, hoping to use my industry connections without having to speak to me directly. "Do you know the owners? Connor's father would be willing to make it worth their while. The Blackwell name still carries significant influence." I bit back a smile at the thinly veiled suggestion that the Blackwell reputation should override Harrington Manor's booking. "Policies. I might be able to make some inquiries. Could I ask why Alexandra isn't reaching out herself?" Elizabeth hesitated, and I could almost hear her calculating the most diplomatic response. "Alexandra mentioned that you two have had some differences of opinion regarding the wedding. She wants it to be rather sophisticated, you understand. The governor will be attending, along with several state representatives. And she feels I wouldn't fit into that picture," I finished for her, keeping my voice level despite the pain her words caused. Young brides can be particular about their vision, Elizabeth offered, neither confirming nor denying my assessment. Alexandra speaks very highly of your determination. Building a business from scratch is certainly admirable if unconventional for a single mother. The condescension in her voice told me everything I needed to know about how Alexandra had been characterizing me to the Blackwells, as someone whose work ethic was perhaps commendable, but whose background and manners would be embarrassingly out of place among their social circle. I'll see what I can do about Harrington Manor, I told Elizabeth, already formulating a plan. I'll have someone contact you directly. After ending the call, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, memories flooding back of the countless meals shared there with Alexandra throughout her childhood. I remembered her as a little girl, proudly helping me prepare catering orders when I was still operating from our home, her small hands carefully arranging appetizers on trays. How had that child become someone who would exclude her own mother from her wedding? The next morning, I called Marcus Jensen, the property manager I'd hired to run Harrington Manor, and instructed him to reach out to Elizabeth Blackwell about her inquiry. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tell her we've had a cancellation for June 15th and could accommodate their wedding. But I'd like to meet with the couple personally to discuss arrangements. Of course, Ms. Rivera. Should I mention your ownership of the property? No, I decided after a moment's reflection. Just schedule a meeting at the manor. It's time for some truths to be acknowledged, but I want to do it face-to-face. That evening, Alexandra called, the first time in nearly 3 weeks. Her voice held the artificial brightness she'd adopted since meeting Connor, a tone so different from her natural warmth that it sometimes made me wonder if I was speaking to a stranger. Mom, you'll never believe it. Harrington Manor had a cancellation. On our exact date. The manager said the owner wants to meet with us tomorrow. Did you have something to do with this? The hope and excitement in her voice stung more than any rejection. She was willing to use my industry connections, but not to have me attend her wedding. I made a few calls, I acknowledged, deciding to hold the full truth for our in-person meeting. I'm glad it worked out. You're the best. I know things have been a bit tense between us lately with all the wedding stress, but this means everything to me. Connor's parents are so particular about the venue being worthy of their guests. I seized the opportunity to address the elephant in the room. Speaking of guests, your Aunt Diane mentioned receiving her invitation. Mine seems to be missing. The silence that followed was deafening. When Alexandra finally spoke, her voice had lost its enthusiasm. Mom, about that. We're keeping the wedding very intimate. Connor's family has certain expectations, and there are important connections to be made. I was going to talk to you about it, but you were hoping. To avoid the conversation entirely, I finished for her. Just like you were hoping to use my professional connections without acknowledging that your intimate wedding doesn't include your own mother. It's not like that, she protested weakly. It's just, Connor's family is very traditional. His mother is on the symphony board. His father might be running for Senate next year. They have a certain image to maintain. And I don't fit that image. You're twisting my words. It's just one day, Mom. Can't you understand how important this is for my future? For our future? The hour struck me. Alexandra was already identifying more with the Blackwells than with her own family. I understand perfectly, I said quietly. I'll see you at Harrington Manor tomorrow at 2. After hanging up, I pulled out a photo album I hadn't looked at in years. Page after page showed Alexandra growing up alongside my business. Her 5th birthday celebrated in the first small cafe I managed to lease. Her middle school graduation coinciding with the opening of my 2nd location. Her high school prom. Pictures taken in the garden of the first major venue where I became the exclusive caterer. Each milestone in her life was intertwined with the growth of the business I had built to support us. A business that had begun out of desperate necessity, when her father left us with nothing but debts and broken promises when Alexandra was only 4 years old. I turned to a particular photo that always brought back vivid memories. 10-year-old Alexandra in an oversized chef's coat, proudly presenting a tray of crooked cookies to the camera. That Christmas, all she had wanted was cooking lessons from me, so I can be just like you, Mom. Where had that girl gone? When had my accomplishments transformed from a source of pride into something shameful in her eyes? The next day, I arrived at Harrington Manor an hour before the scheduled meeting. The estate had been my most ambitious acquisition, a historic property with deteriorating grandeur that most investors had considered too risky to purchase. Where others saw an expensive money pit, I had recognized untapped potential. After extensive renovations that preserved its historic character while adding modern amenities, Harrington Manor had become the crown jewel of my business holdings, though few knew of my connection to it. I walked through the grand foyer with its restored herringbone floors and chandelier that I had personally found at an estate sale in Rhode Island. The main ballroom, where Alexandra hoped to host her reception, had been painstakingly returned to its original splendor, with hand-painted, ceiling murals and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking carefully landscaped gardens. Everything about the space reflected my personal touch and aesthetic vision, from the custom draperies to the antique sideboards I had sourced from across the country. Marcus met me in the library, which we had converted into a meeting room for potential clients. "The Blackwells and Ms. Rivera, your daughter, have arrived," he informed me. "They're waiting in the East drawing room. Mrs. Blackwell has already requested several modifications to our standard package, including extended hours and additional rooms for preparation." "Thank you, Marcus. Please show them in here and bring refreshments, the special reserve wine and the artisanal cheese selection." Moments later, the door opened to reveal Alexandra, looking polished and nervous in a designer dress I had never seen, accompanied by Connor, tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident bearing of someone who has never worried about money, and his parents, who surveyed the room with the critical assessment of people accustomed to evaluating their surroundings in terms of status and cost. Alexandra's eyes widened when she saw me sitting behind the desk. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought we're meeting with the owner." "You are," I replied calmly, standing to greet them. "Welcome to Harrington Manor. I'm glad you appreciate the venue I've created." Connor's father, Richard Blackwell, stepped forward with a politician's smile, extending his hand. "Ms. Rivera, we weren't aware of your connection to this property. Alexandra mentioned you were in catering, not real estate." "My business interests are diverse," I explained, shaking his hand firmly. "Catering was my first venture, but over the past 15 years I've expanded into venue management and property investment. Harrington Manor is my most significant acquisition to date." Alexandra stared at me, confusion and embarrassment battling across her face. "You own Harrington Manor? Since when? Why didn't you ever say anything?" 3 years ago. "And you?" "Never asked." I gestured toward the seating area where Marcus had arranged an elegant spread of refreshments. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss about your wedding plans." Elizabeth Blackwell recovered quickly from her surprise, her social training taking over as she settled gracefully onto an antique settee. "This explains why you were able to accommodate us despite the venue's reputation for being fully booked. Family connections do have their advantages." Her tone suggested she was mentally recalculating her assessment of me, still not as a social equal, but perhaps as someone with more useful influence than she had initially assumed. "Actually," I corrected her gently, "I'm not accommodating. You because Alexandra is my daughter. I agreed to meet because I was curious about a bride who would use her mother's professional connections while excluding her from the wedding itself." Connor looked confused, turning to Alexandra. "What does she mean, excluding her?" You said your mother was helping coordinate the vendors because of her industry experience. Alexandra flushed deeply. It's not like that. I was going to invite her, of course. There was just some confusion about the guest list restrictions. There's no confusion, I said, keeping my voice level despite the hurt and anger threatening to surface. You deliberately left me off the guest list because you were ashamed of me. You thought I wouldn't fit in with the image you're trying to project to Connor's family and their social circle. Richard Blackwell cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps this is a family matter best discussed privately. Our interest is simply in securing this beautiful venue for the wedding. The governor has already confirmed his attendance, and we need to finalize arrangements. This is very much about the venue, I replied, turning my attention to him. Because, before we discuss booking Harrington Manor, I need everyone in this room to understand exactly what's happening here. Alexandra has spent the past 6 months distancing herself from me, canceling our regular dinners, being vague about wedding plans, and ultimately deciding I wasn't refined enough to attend her wedding at a venue I actually own. Connor looked increasingly uncomfortable, glancing between Alexandra and his parents. There must be some misunderstanding. Alexandra speaks very highly of you, Ms. Rivera. Does she? I asked, genuinely curious. What exactly has she told you about me and my background? He hesitated, which told me everything. She mentioned, you run a successful catering company. That's true, but incomplete. I started that company 25 years ago from my apartment kitchen after Alexandra's father abandoned us with nothing. I cooked during the day, delivered food in the evening, and did bookkeeping at night while Alexandra slept. I worked 18-hour days for years to keep us afloat, to ensure Alexandra could attend good schools, participate in extracurricular activities, and eventually go to college without crushing student debt. I turned to Alexandra, whose eyes were now fixed on her hands folded tightly in her lap. What I built wasn't just a business, but a life for us when we had nothing. Every opportunity you've had came from those years of sacrifice. And yet now, those same accomplishments make me someone you're ashamed to have at your wedding. Elizabeth shifted uncomfortably, her perfectly maintained composure finally showing cracks. Alexandra assured us you were comfortable with the, intimate nature of the ceremony. Family dynamics can be complex, but surely we can move past this awkwardness to finalize the arrangements. Harrington Manor is exactly what we envisioned for the wedding. I'm sure it is, I acknowledged. I designed it that way. Every detail of this venue, from the restored parquet floors to the hand-selected lighting fixtures, represents my personal vision and taste. The same working-class background and aesthetic sensibilities that Alexandra apparently feels would embarrass her among your social circle. Alexandra finally looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. Mom, please, you're making this into something. It isn't. I just wanted one perfect day where everything was elegant and sophisticated. Unlike me? I asked softly. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I corrected her, but gently now, seeing the confused young woman before me rather than the confident social climber she had been pretending to be. Somewhere along the way, you decided that my success, built through hard work rather than inheritance or connections, was something to be minimized rather than celebrated. That my hands, which still sometimes bear burns from my years in the kitchen, weren't refined enough to be seen at your wedding. Connor, to his credit, seemed genuinely distressed by this revelation. Alexandra, is this true? Did you intentionally exclude your mother from our wedding? Before she could answer, Richard Blackwell intervened, clearly eager to salvage the situation now that he understood my ownership of the coveted venue. Let's not get sidetracked. I'm sure there's been a simple misunderstanding that can be cleared up. The important thing is securing Harrington Manor for the date. We're prepared to pay a premium for any inconvenience. I recognized his tactic immediately. Redirect from the emotional conflict to a business transaction where money could solve the problem. I had faced similar dismissals throughout my career, particularly from wealthy clients who assumed my working-class origins meant I could be easily bought off or impressed by their financial offers. This isn't about money, Mr. Blackwell. This is about respect and honesty. Values I thought I had instilled in my daughter. I turned back to Alexandra, whose facade had crumbled completely, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. The irony is that if you had simply been honest with me, if you had said you wanted a wedding that reflected Connor's family traditions more than ours, I would have understood. I might have been hurt, but I would have respected your choice. Instead, you tried to erase me from one of the most important days of your life, while simultaneously using my professional connections to get what you wanted. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words barely audible. I didn't know how to tell. You. Connor's parents had such specific expectations, and I was afraid of disappointing everyone. So you chose to disappoint me instead, I finished for her, the pain of that choice evident in my voice despite my efforts to remain composed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Connor looked torn between comforting Alexandra and addressing the revelation about her deception. His parents exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their recalculation of the situation, and possibly of me as well. I took a deep breath, centering myself before continuing. Here's what's going to happen now. I'll leave you all to discuss this privately for 30 minutes. When I return, Alexandra needs to decide what kind of wedding she truly wants and who she wants to be there. Because Harrington Manor is available on June 15th, but my participation, as either the venue owner or as mother of the bride, depends entirely on her answer. As I stood to leave, Elizabeth Blackwell also rose, her socialite poise reasserting itself. Ms. Rivera, while this family matter is undoubtedly important, perhaps we could discuss the venue details separately. The arrangements really shouldn't be contingent on personal disputes. I met her gaze directly. Mrs. Blackwell, every aspect of Harrington Manor, from the restored crown molding to the hand-selected linens, reflects my personal vision and taste. The same working-class background and aesthetic that your family apparently finds unsuitable for your son's wedding. So you'll forgive me if I consider the two inseparable. I left them in the library, instructing Marcus to ensure they had privacy, while making it clear they shouldn't leave the room. Then I walked through the gardens I had painstakingly restored, trying to process the conflicting emotions churning within me. Hurt at Alexandra's rejection, anger at her deception, but also a growing concern that I had perhaps failed her in some fundamental way. Had my single-minded focus on building financial security blinded me to something important she had needed from me? The gardens had always been my sanctuary, particularly the hidden corner where I had created a small memorial. To my own mother, a simple stone bench surrounded by her favorite roses. Mom had died the year before I purchased Harrington Manor, never seeing this crowning achievement of my career. She had been my first supporter when I started cooking professionally, watching Alexandra after school when I couldn't afford childcare, believing in me when everyone else thought a single mother with no formal training couldn't possibly succeed in the competitive hospitality industry. What would you tell me to do now, Mom? I whispered to the roses swaying gently in the afternoon. Breeze. Though no audible answer came, I felt a sense of clarity settle over me. This confrontation with Alexandra wasn't just about a wedding invitation or social embarrassment. It was about values, about honesty, and about the kind of person my daughter was choosing to become. I could either enable her transformation into someone who prioritized appearances over authenticity, or I could hold firm to the principles I had tried to teach her throughout her life. After precisely 30 minutes, I returned to the library. The atmosphere had visibly shifted. Richard Blackwell stood by the window looking distinctly uncomfortable, while Elizabeth perched on the edge of the settee, her posture rigid. Connor sat beside Alexandra on the sofa, holding her hand. Their heads bent together in quiet conversation. All eyes turned to me as I entered. "Have you had enough time to consider your priorities?" I asked, addressing my question primarily to Alexandra. She nodded, wiping away the remnants of tears with a tissue. "Mom, I am so sorry. I got caught up in trying to impress Connor's family, in trying to fit into a world that felt so different from ours. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing the differences between our backgrounds as deficiencies rather than just differences." Connor squeezed her hand supportively. "We've had a good talk, Ms. Rivera. I had no idea Alexandra felt pressured to create some kind of perfect society wedding. That was never my expectation." He shot a meaningful glance toward his parents before continuing. "I fell in love with Alexandra because she's genuine and warm and grounded, qualities she clearly got from you. I don't want our wedding to be some political networking event. I wanted to celebrate our relationship and the families that shaped us, both families." Richard Blackwell cleared his throat. "Perhaps we've been overly prescriptive about the wedding plans. Our intention was to give Alexandra and Connor a memorable celebration, not to create family discord." "What my husband is trying to say," Elizabeth interjected, her tone notably less condescending than before, "is that we may have allowed our social expectations to overshadow what should be most important: Connor's happiness and his relationship with the family he's marrying into." I wasn't entirely convinced by this sudden change of heart. It seemed more likely they were recalibrating their approach now that they understood my ownership of Harrington Manor, but I appreciated the effort at reconciliation nonetheless. "And what about you, Alexandra?" I asked, needing to hear her perspective directly. "What kind of wedding do you want now?" She took a deep breath, looking more like her authentic self than she had in months. "I want a wedding that honors both sides of our family. I want you there not just as a guest, but in the role you deserve. As mother of the bride, as the woman who sacrificed everything to give me the life I have. And—" She hesitated, glancing at Connor, who nodded encouragingly. "We'd like to incorporate your catering for the reception. No one's food compares to yours, and it would make the day so much more meaningful." The request surprised me, not because Alexandra didn't appreciate my cooking, but because she had seemed so determined to distance herself from my professional identity. "Are you sure? What about the governor and state representatives? Will they appreciate a menu from Rivera Catering rather than whatever trendy molecular gastronomy chef the country club is using these days?" A hint of Alexandra's natural humor surfaced in her smile. "Mom, your last charity dinner was covered in food and wine. You've catered for 2 Hollywood productions filming in the area. I think the governor will survive eating your award-winning cuisine." For the first time since entering the room, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to release. "And the venue?" "We would still love to have our wedding at Harrington Manor," she confirmed. "But now I understand it's not just because it's exclusive or impressive. It's because it represents what you've built, your vision, your success, your incredible eye for beauty and detail. There's no place more fitting for me to get married than in the space you created." I studied my daughter's face, looking for any sign that this change of heart was merely a strategic pivot to secure the venue. What I saw instead was genuine remorse, a return of the authentic Alexandra who had been gradually disappearing since her relationship with Connor began. "In that case," I said finally, "Harrington Manor is available on June 15th for the wedding of Alexandra Rivera and Connor Blackwell. Standard rates apply, but the mother of the bride might be persuaded to contribute the catering as her gift to the couple." Alexandra rose from the sofa and crossed to where I stood, enveloping me in a hug that broke down the last of my emotional defenses. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered against my shoulder. "I lost sight of what really matters. Can you forgive me?" I held my daughter close, remembering the little girl who had once been so proud to help in my kitchen, who had told her elementary school class that her mother was a food artist, who had never been ashamed of our modest apartment, or my work-roughened hands. Always, I assured her, because despite the hurt, that was the simple truth. But promise me something. Don't ever again hide who you are or where you come from. The right people, the ones worth impressing, will value your authenticity more than any polished facade. Over her shoulder, I saw Connor watching us with what appeared to be genuine affection. His parents' expressions were more complex. Elizabeth still seemed somewhat rigid, though making visible efforts to appear supportive, while Richard had the calculating look of a man reassessing a situation and identifying new potential advantages. I had no illusions that this single confrontation would completely transform the Blackwells' attitude toward me, or erase their social pretensions. But it had created an opening for honesty, for Alexandra to begin her marriage without the burden of pretending to be someone she wasn't, and for me to reclaim my rightful place in my daughter's life. In the months that followed, planning the wedding became a process of genuine collaboration. Alexandra and I resumed our weekly dinners, where she gradually revealed how the pressure to fit into Connor's social circle had overwhelmed her natural confidence. Connor himself proved to be more grounded than his parents, often siding with Alexandra and me when Elizabeth attempted to steer wedding plans toward ostentatious displays meant to impress their social connections. One evening, as Alexandra and I finalized the menu in my home kitchen, the same kitchen where she had learned to cook as a child, she looked up from the tasting samples with unexpected tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Is the salmon too citrusy?" She laughed, wiping her eyes. "The food is perfect, as always. I was just thinking about how close I came to ruining everything. Not just our relationship, but my relationship with myself. I was so focused on becoming someone the Blackwells would accept that I almost lost sight of who I really am." I set down my tasting spoon, giving her my full attention. That kind of pressure can be insidious. It creeps in gradually until suddenly you're making choices you never thought you would. "How did you resist it?" she asked. "All those years catering for wealthy clients, building your business in circles where people probably looked down on you for being self-taught and self-made, how did you stay true to yourself?" The question made me realize something I had never fully articulated, even to myself. "I think it was because I had you," I told her honestly. Every compromise I might have been tempted to make, every shortcut that would have undermined my integrity, I couldn't do it because I knew you were watching. I wanted to show you that success shouldn't require erasing where you come from or pretending to be someone you're not. And then I turned around and did exactly that, she said ruefully. "You lost your way temporarily," I corrected her, "but you found it again. That's what matters." On the morning of the wedding, I arrived at Harrington Manor hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. As owner, I wanted to ensure everything was perfect. As mother of the bride, I needed those quiet moments to prepare emotionally for the day ahead. The manor had never looked more beautiful. June sunshine streamed through the tall windows of the ballroom where the reception would be held, illuminating floral arrangements that incorporated both sophisticated orchids, Elizabeth's preference, and wildflowers from my mother's native region, my tribute to family heritage. The place settings featured fine china alongside handcrafted ceramic accent plates from a local artist I had supported since the early days of my catering business. Every detail represented the thoughtful blending of different worlds, elegant, without being pretentious, refined without rejecting the authenticity of craftsmanship and personal connection. When Alexandra arrived for her final preparations, she found me in the bridal suite, arranging a surprise I had planned for her. A small display of family photographs spanning 4 generations, from my grandmother's sepia-toned wedding portrait to candid shots of Alexandra growing up alongside my growing business. "Mom, this is perfect," she exclaimed, examining the photographs with evident emotion. "Connor's going to love seeing these glimpses of our family history." I handed her a small velvet box, another surprise I had kept for this moment. This was your grandmother's. She wore it at her wedding, and I wore it at mine. It's not as flashy as the jewelry Connor's family might expect, but it's perfect, Alexandra interrupted, opening the box to reveal a delicate pearl bracelet with a small sapphire clasp. Something old, something blue, and something infinitely more precious than any designer accessory Elizabeth suggested. As she fastened it around her wrist, I saw in her the perfect blend of the little girl I had raised and the confident woman she had become. Someone who understood that true sophistication came not from pretense, but from knowing exactly who you were and honoring the journey that shaped you. The ceremony itself was everything Alexandra and Connor had hoped for, meaningful without being ostentatious, personal while still respecting traditions important to both families. When it came time for the mother of the bride to be escorted to her seat, I walked proudly down the aisle, exchanging a warm glance with Marcus, who stood discreetly at the back of the room, helping to ensure that the venue I had created operated flawlessly on this most important day. During the reception, Richard Blackwell approached me, champagne flute in hand. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Rivera," he said, surprising me with his directness. "I misjudged you based on preconceptions about what success should look like. Watching you today, seeing how you've built all this, has been enlightening." "Apology accepted," I replied, genuine in my response despite my lingering wariness of his political instincts. "I hope we can move forward with a better understanding of each other." He nodded, then added with a hint of his strategic mindset, "My campaign team tells me there's significant voter interest in self-made business leaders, particularly women entrepreneurs who have overcome obstacles. Perhaps sometime we could discuss your journey in more detail." I couldn't help but laugh at his transparent pivot to how my story might benefit his political aspirations. "Perhaps, Mr. Blackwell. But today isn't about campaigns or business strategies. It's about celebrating Alexandra and Connor and the family we're all creating together." As the evening progressed, I found myself standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching Alexandra and Connor share their first dance beneath the chandeliers I had personally selected for this very room. Elizabeth Blackwell appeared at my side, her social mask softened somewhat by emotion, and perhaps by the excellent wine my catering team had selected. "You've created something remarkable here," she acknowledged, gesturing to the beautifully appointed room. "Not just the venue, but the entire event. It's elegant without being showy, refined without feeling cold." "That's always been my philosophy," I told her. "True luxury isn't about ostentatious displays. It's about quality, attention to detail, and creating experiences that feel both special and genuine." She studied me with new consideration. "I think perhaps I've underestimated you, Ms. Rivera. When Alexandra first described you as a caterer, I envisioned someone different. Less capable, less refined, I suggested, not unkindly. Less formidable, she admitted with surprising candor. I see now where Alexandra gets her strength. As the celebration continued around us, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Not just the wedding day itself, but the 25 years of building a life and business from nothing. The recent months of reconciliation with Alexandra, and the gradual, sometimes uncomfortable merging of two very different families. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been pain, misunderstandings, and moments when it seemed the distance between us might be unbridgeable. But standing in Harrington Manor, the physical manifestation of my success and vision, watching my daughter celebrate her marriage, surrounded by people from all facets of her life, I felt a profound sense of completion. Alexandra caught my eye from across the room and raised her glass in a private toast, her expression conveying everything words couldn't: gratitude, love, and a renewed appreciation for the journey we had shared. I raised my own glass in response, silently acknowledging not just the day's celebration, but the deeper recognition it represented. Of my place in her life, of the value of authenticity over pretense, and of the enduring power of staying true to oneself, even when the world encourages compromise. In that moment, I knew that regardless of what the future held for all of us, the most important legacy I would leave my daughter wasn't Harrington Manor or my business empire, but the example I had set. That success built on integrity and hard work could withstand any challenge, and that no social aspiration was worth sacrificing your true self to achieve. My journey into the culinary world wasn't part of some grand plan. It was born from necessity after Alexandra's father walked out of our lives. Chris had been my college sweetheart, charming and ambitious, but ultimately unprepared for the responsibilities of marriage and parenthood. When Alexandra was 4, he announced he'd taken a job across the country, packed his belongings, and disappeared from our lives, leaving behind unpaid bills and broken promises. I was 26, with no family wealth to fall back on, minimal savings, and a daughter who didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. My parents, hard-working immigrants who had spent their lives in factory jobs, could offer emotional support, but little financial assistance. I had a degree in hospitality management, but had been working as an administrative assistant to accommodate Chris's career and our family schedule. The first month after he left was a blur of panic and sleepless nights. How would I pay rent? How could I work full-time while caring for Alexandra? The turning point came one evening as I prepared a simple dinner from the dwindling supplies in our pantry. A fragrant rice dish with carefully spiced vegetables, my grandmother's recipe adapted to whatever ingredients I had available. "Mommy, this is yummy," Alexandra said, her small face brightening for the first time in days. "You cook better than the restaurant." That innocent comment sparked something in me. I'd always loved cooking, had grown up learning traditional recipes at my grandmother's side, but had never considered it as more than a household skill. That night, after putting Alexandra to bed, I stayed up creating a business plan for what would eventually become Rivera Catering. I began small, impossibly small by most standards. I printed flyers at the local library advertising home-cooked meals for busy professionals, specialty dishes for dinner parties, and simple catering for office meetings. My initial investment was just $218, spent on additional cooking supplies and ingredients for sample dishes. I delivered each order personally, sometimes with Alexandra in tow when childcare arrangements fell through. Those early years were a constant exercise in problem-solving and perseverance. I converted our tiny apartment kitchen into a food preparation space, waking at 4 a.m. to prep before Alexandra got up for school. I learned to negotiate payment terms with clients that would allow me to purchase ingredients without a business credit line. I mastered the art of transforming humble ingredients into dishes that looked and tasted luxurious. What I lacked in formal culinary training, I made up for with research, practice, and an uncompromising commitment to quality. I checked out stacks of cookbooks from the public library, studying techniques and flavor profiles late into the night. When I couldn't afford specialized equipment, I improvised, using a wine bottle as a rolling pin, repurposing glass jars as measuring cups. The first year was barely sustainable. There were nights I ate little so Alexandra could have proper bills I juggled precariously to keep our electricity from being shut off. But gradually, word spread about my food. A corporate client who had ordered a modest lunch spread referred me to their CEO for a holiday party. A professor who hired me for a faculty gathering recommended me to the University Alumni Association. Each new opportunity brought challenges that stretched my capabilities. When an art gallery requested catering for 75 people, far more than I had ever served, I transformed my apartment into an assembly line, recruiting 2 neighbors to help plate appetizers in exchange for meals for their families. When a bride asked if I could create a wedding cake, I spent weeks practicing techniques I learned from library books until I could produce something worthy of her special day. By the time Alexandra started kindergarten, Rivera Catering had established Enough regular clients that I could afford to rent a small commercial kitchen space shared with 3 other food entrepreneurs. Having a dedicated workspace, even for just a few hours daily, was transformative. I could accept larger orders, store more supplies, and most importantly, separate my work from our living space, giving Alexandra a more normal home environment. The kindergarten years brought another pivotal development in our lives. Alexandra's teacher, Ms. Parker, noticed her talent for art and suggested an after-school program at the community center. The program cost was modest, but still beyond my tight budget. When I reluctantly explained our situation, Ms. Parker connected me with the program director, who offered an exchange. I would provide refreshments for their monthly art showcases, in return for Alexandra's participation. This arrangement became my first regular exposure to the world of wealthier families in our community. As I served elegant bite-sized desserts and savory appetizers at these showcases, I observed the confident parents in designer clothes, casually discussing vacation homes and private schools. Their world seemed galaxies away from our one-bedroom apartment and careful budgeting. But I absorbed everything. How they spoke, how they dressed, how they networked. Not because I wanted to become them, but because I recognized these were the people who could afford to hire caterers for their special events. One mother, Valerie Harmon, approached me during the 3rd showcase I catered. "These tarts are extraordinary," she said, examining the delicate pastry with genuine appreciation. "Where did you train?" "My grandmother's kitchen initially," I answered honestly, "and lots of practice since then." Rather than the dismissal I half expected, Valerie seemed intrigued. "Sometimes that's the best education. Listen, I'm on the planning committee for the Hospital Foundation Gala. Our usual caterer just canceled. Some nonsense about a celebrity client in the Hamptons. Would you be interested in submitting a proposal?" That conversation changed everything. The hospital gala was the most prestigious social event in our small city, attended by everyone from business leaders to local politicians. I spent 3 days developing a proposal that stretched my culinary abilities while remaining executable in my limited kitchen space. I priced it aggressively low, knowing this opportunity was worth more than immediate profit. When the committee selected my proposal, I faced the largest logistical challenge of my career. I needed staff, transportation, serving equipment, resources I simply didn't have. I reached out to the culinary program at the community college, offering students practical experience and recommendations in exchange for their assistance. I rented equipment I couldn't afford to purchase, negotiating payment terms that aligned with the gala's payment schedule. The night of the gala, Alexandra stayed with a neighbor while I directed a hastily assembled team of 6 culinary students through service for 200 guests. Everything that could go wrong seemed determined to do so. A delivery of seafood arrived. Late and partially thawed, 2 students called in sick, and the venue's power fluctuated throughout the evening, affecting our warming equipment. I problem-solved each crisis, smiling confidently even as I scrambled behind the scenes, determined that no guest would sense our challenges. By some miracle, or perhaps sheer force of will, the event was a success. The hospital director personally thanked me for the finest meal we've had at any foundation event, and guests requested my business cards throughout the evening. I returned home at 2 a.m., exhausted beyond words but exhilarated by what we had accomplished. The gala became my first stepping stone into a higher tier of catering. Referrals multiplied, allowing me to secure a small business loan to lease my own kitchen space. I hired my first full-time employee, Maria, a talented chef who had been laid off from a local restaurant and became my right hand, mentor, and friend, all rolled into one. With her formal training complementing my intuitive approach, we refined our menu offerings and operational systems. Through these early business developments, Alexandra remained my priority and my motivation. I structured my work schedule around her school hours whenever possible, brought her to the kitchen during school breaks, and turned our food deliveries into adventures we shared. She developed her own fascination with food, not just the cooking, But the presentation, the cultural stories behind different dishes, the way food brought people together. When she was 8, I created a special step stool that allowed her to safely work at the prep counter. She became our official garnish artist, arranging herb sprigs and edible flowers with an attention to detail that impressed even our most sophisticated clients. By 10, she could prepare simple dishes independently, beaming with pride when customers praised items she had helped create. These kitchen experiences taught Alexandra lessons that went far beyond culinary skills. She witnessed problem-solving in real time as we adapted to unexpected challenges. She observed the dignity of hard work, the importance of treating every team member with respect regardless of their role. She learned that presenting oneself professionally didn't require expensive clothes, but rather cleanliness, attention to detail, and genuine confidence. As Rivera Catering gradually expanded, I reinvested nearly every dollar of profit back into the business. We moved to a larger commercial kitchen, purchased our own delivery van, and developed specialized menus for corporate events, weddings, and charitable functions. I remained our primary sales representative, meeting with potential clients in my carefully maintained business attire, not designer labels but always impeccably pressed and professional. When Alexandra was 12, we finally moved from our one-bedroom apartment to a modest two-bedroom townhouse, a monumental achievement that represented years of sacrifice and persistence. The day we moved in, I presented Alexandra with her own room key on a special keychain. "This home is our success," I told her as she admired the small brass key. "Every event we catered, every early morning, every creative solution to a problem. It all led to this moment. Never forget that with enough determination, you can build something meaningful from nothing." That lesson seemed to resonate deeply with her. Throughout middle school, Alexandra applied herself to academics with the same determination she had observed in my business building. She developed a particular interest in her art classes, showing natural talent for design and visual presentation, skills she continued to apply in our catering work during weekends and school breaks. By the time Alexandra entered high school, Rivera Catering had established a solid reputation in our region. We weren't the flashiest operation. I never adopted the molecular gastronomy trends or extreme presentation styles that some competitors embraced, but we became known for exceptional quality, reliability, and personalized service. We had grown to a team of 8 full-time staff, plus a roster of part-time servers for larger events. Our client list expanded to include several corporate headquarters, university departments, local politicians, and even a few celebrities who maintained homes in the area. I was no longer delivering food personally or working in the kitchen every day, though I remained deeply involved in menu development and quality control. My role had evolved to focus on client relationships, business strategy, and mentoring our growing team. This evolution created more stability in our lives and allowed me to be more present for Alexandra's high school activities. I rarely missed her art exhibitions or academic presentations, arranging our catering schedule to accommodate these important moments. Though we still lived modestly compared to many of her classmates' families, we were comfortable, secure, and proud of what we had built together. The summer before Alexandra's junior year brought another significant step in our journey: the opportunity to become the exclusive caterer for Westfield Gardens, a historic property that hosted weddings and corporate retreats. The estate's previous caterer was retiring, and the property manager approached me based on our reputation for quality and professionalism. The Westfield contract represented both opportunity and challenge. The volume would require expanding our staff and upgrading some equipment. The clientele included many of the region's wealthiest families who expected standards of service we would need to elevate further. Most intimidatingly, the contract included accommodating international cuisine requirements for corporate clients, areas where my self-taught background had limitations. I approached this challenge as I had all others, with research, careful planning, and strategic collaboration. I enrolled in specialized culinary workshops to expand my expertise in international cuisines. I hired a consultant with luxury hotel experience to train our service staff in elevated presentation techniques. Alexandra, now 16, contributed ideas for modernizing our presentation while respecting traditional elements that had become our signature. Our first major event at Westfield Gardens, a wedding for the daughter of a prominent local family, tested everything we had prepared. The bride requested a fusion menu reflecting her Italian heritage and her fiancé's Japanese background, challenging us to create dishes that honored both traditions while maintaining cohesion. The guest list included several renowned chefs, adding pressure to every aspect of our execution. The event's success marked a turning point for Rivera Catering. Photographs of our presentation appeared in a regional wedding magazine. 3 more Westfield couples requested our services after attending this celebration. Most significantly, a developer who attended the wedding approached me about a new project, a boutique hotel downtown that needed a signature restaurant concept. This conversation planted the first seed of what would eventually become my diversification into property investment. The developer, impressed by our food and business model, suggested I consider not just providing catering, but partnering in the hotel restaurant ownership. When I explained that my capital was limited, he introduced me to the concept of leveraging my expertise as equity. My culinary vision and operational systems could be valued as a significant contribution to the partnership. This introduction to investment thinking came at a pivotal time. Alexandra was beginning to consider college options, and while I had established a modest education fund, the reality of university costs loomed large. Additionally, I had begun to recognize the physical limitations of a career centered entirely on food preparation. The long hours standing, the repetitive motions, and constant time pressure had started taking a toll on my body, despite my relatively young age. With characteristic thoroughness, I educated myself about business partnerships, property investment, and the hospitality industry beyond catering. I enrolled in weekend business classes at the community college, networked with restaurant owners to understand their challenges, and met with financial advisors to structure a sustainable expansion plan. The boutique hotel restaurant, which we named Races, honoring my family's cultural heritage, opened 18 months later. I maintained majority ownership of Rivera Catering while holding a 30% stake in the restaurant. We designed systems that allowed both businesses to share resources efficiently. Staff could work across both operations during their respective peak periods, purchasing gained economies of scale, and specialized equipment could serve multiple functions. Throughout this business expansion, Alexandra remained my trusted confidant and occasional advisor. Now in her final year of high school, she had developed a sophisticated understanding of business operations through years of hands-on involvement in our catering work. She participated in design meetings for the restaurant, offering insights about the aesthetic preferences of younger customers that proved invaluable. "You're creating more than a restaurant, Mom," she observed during one late-night planning session at our kitchen table. "You're building a legacy, something that represents everything you've worked for all these years." Her perspective helped me articulate a vision that went beyond profit margins or culinary trends. Raíces would showcase the journey from my grandmother's traditional recipes to contemporary interpretations, honoring the immigrant experience that shaped our family history. The design would reflect warmth and authenticity rather than trendiness, creating a space where guests felt simultaneously special and comfortable. When the restaurant opened to positive reviews and strong reservations, Alexandra beamed with pride during our friends and family preview night. "See how people are responding to your vision," she whispered as we observed guests exclaiming over the environment and food. "This is what happens when you stay true to your values instead of just chasing what's popular." That observation reflected the values I had tried to instill in her: authenticity, quality, respect for heritage while embracing innovation. I believed she had absorbed these lessons deeply, which made her transformation during college all the more surprising and painful. Alexandra was accepted to Westridge University, a prestigious private institution known for its arts program. The scholarship she received, combined with my careful savings and current business success, made this opportunity possible without crushing debt. I helped her move into her dormitory, arranging her art supplies and small mementos from home, fighting back tears as I prepared to leave my daughter, my partner in building our life, on her own for the first time. "You've prepared for this moment since I was 4 years old," she reminded me gently, sensing my emotion. "Everything you built, all those early mornings and late nights, they led to this opportunity. I won't waste it." Her first year proved her words sincere. She excelled academically, particularly in design courses, calling me regularly to share new techniques she was learning or concepts that excited her. During school breaks, she still participated in catering events, now bringing sophisticated design principles to our presentation. She seemed to be integrating her educational experience with the practical business knowledge she had gained throughout childhood. Exactly the balance I had hoped she would achieve. The subtle changes began during her sophomore year, after she was accepted into a prestigious student arts organization. Her calls became less frequent, her conversations more focused on new friends from wealthy backgrounds and exclusive social events. When she did work catering events during breaks, she seemed slightly embarrassed by our straightforward approach, suggesting elevated presentation techniques that sometimes prioritized appearance over practicality or quality. The Simpson wedding. "Planner asked where you trained?" she reported after one event, looking uncomfortable. "I didn't know what to say when she seemed surprised you don't have formal culinary credentials." "You could have told her the truth," I replied simply, "that I learned from family traditions, professional experience, and continuous self-education. My results speak for themselves." She nodded without meeting my eyes. "Of course. It's just, sometimes people expect certain backgrounds in this industry." That conversation revealed the first hairline fracture in our shared value system, a subtle shift in Alexandra's perspective about what constituted legitimate success. I tried to address it directly, reminding her that results and integrity mattered more than credentials or connections, but I sensed my words weren't fully resonating. By her junior year, the changes had become more pronounced. She joined a sorority known for its wealthy membership and social connections, began dating a business major from a prominent family, and showed decreasing interest in our catering operations during breaks. When she did participate, she seemed eager to handle client interactions rather than food preparation, particularly with our most affluent customers. During this period, I continued expanding my business interests, partly motivated by wanting to secure Alexandra's future and partly recognizing the need to diversify beyond the physical demands of catering. The success of races led to opportunities to consult on other restaurant concepts. I began cautiously investing in commercial kitchen properties, leveraging my understanding of what food businesses needed in terms of infrastructure and location. These investments performed well, generating returns that allowed me to explore larger opportunities. When a small events venue on the outskirts of town went up for sale, I recognized its potential despite its rundown condition. The property featured charming historic architecture and beautiful grounds that had suffered from neglect under distant corporate ownership. I purchased Hillcrest Hall using profits from my other businesses, plus a carefully structured loan. The renovation became a labor of love. I worked directly with contractors to restore original features while modernizing essential systems, designed gardens inspired by my grandmother's descriptions of her childhood home, and created flexible spaces that could accommodate anything from intimate gatherings to medium-sized celebrations. Throughout this project, I tried to involve Alexandra during her school breaks, hoping to reignite her connection to our shared journey. Sometimes glimpses of her authentic self would emerge, her excitement when uncovering original hardwood floors beneath worn carpet, her creative suggestions for repurposing architectural elements we couldn't fully restore. But these moments became increasingly rare as her senior year progressed, and her social circle became more exclusive. When Alexandra announced her engagement to Connor Blackwell during her final semester, I was surprised by the whirlwind timing, but genuinely happy for her. Connor seemed intelligent and ambitious, if somewhat conventional in his thinking. During their brief visit to share the news, he treated me with polite respect, though I noticed he seemed more interested in discussing my business success than getting to know me personally. Rivera Catering, races, Hillcrest Hall, and now. "I hear you're renovating commercial properties downtown," he commented during dinner at my home. "That's an impressive portfolio for someone who started with no formal business training." His observation was accurate, but carried a subtle undertone that didn't escape me. The implication that my success was somehow more notable because of my lack of traditional credentials or family backing. I recognized in his polite condescension the same attitude I had encountered throughout my career from people born into privilege who viewed self-made success as an interesting anomaly rather than a demonstration of capability. "Formal training takes many forms," I replied evenly. "I've invested in continuous education throughout my career, just through experience and targeted learning rather than traditional degree programs." The conversation moved on, but I noticed Alexandra watching this exchange with a complex expression, part embarrassment, part defensiveness, as though caught between two worlds she wasn't sure how to reconcile. As they prepared to leave the next day, Alexandra hugged me with what seemed like genuine affection. "We'll call soon about wedding plans," she promised. "Connor's mother knows all the best venues and vendors. She's on several charity boards and has planned major events." I noted the implication that Elizabeth Blackwell's social connections qualified her to guide wedding decisions more than my actual professional experience in the event industry. But I simply smiled and wished them a safe trip back to campus. In the weeks that followed, Alexandra's calls about wedding plans never materialized. Instead, I received occasional brief text updates. They had selected a date in June, they were considering several venues. Connor's mother was handling most. Details since Alexandra was busy with final projects and job interviews. Each message increased the distance I felt growing between us, yet I tried to respect her independence, responding with enthusiasm and offers of help without pushing too hard. It wasn't until I heard from Diane about receiving her invitation that I finally confronted the painful reality. Alexandra had decided I didn't fit into the wedding she was planning, a wedding designed to impress the Blackwells' social circle, rather than celebrate authentic relationships and values. The revelation hurt more deeply than I could have anticipated. Throughout all our years of struggle and success, I had never imagined that my daughter would one day view me as an embarrassment rather than a source of pride, that she would value social appearances over the bond we had forged while building our lives together from nothing. As I prepared for the meeting at Harrington Manor, selecting an outfit that projected quiet confidence rather than trying to impress, I wondered where my own responsibility lay in this painful situation. Had my focus on business building somehow failed to prepare Alexandra for navigating different social worlds? Had my emphasis on practical achievement overlooked something important about helping her develop secure identity when confronted with wealth and status? These questions lingered as I walked through the manor house I had lovingly restored, touching the banister my own hands had helped refinish, straightening a painting I had personally selected. Whatever mistakes I might have made along the way, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Reconciliation would require honesty, not pretense. Alexandra needed to recognize that genuine success, in business, relationships, and life, stemmed from authenticity, not from contorting oneself to meet others' expectations. With that clarity guiding me, I took a deep breath and prepared to meet my daughter and her fiancé's family, hoping that the confrontation ahead might ultimately lead us back to the shared values and mutual respect that had sustained us throughout our journey. The weeks following our confrontation at Harrington Manor transformed our family dynamics in ways I couldn't have anticipated. While Alexandra and I had reached a tentative reconciliation during that emotional meeting, rebuilding genuine trust would require more than a single heartfelt conversation. True healing demanded daily choices, consistent authenticity, and the courage to examine uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationships. 3 days after our meeting, Alexandra asked if we could have dinner alone at my home, not the townhouse where she had grown up, but the modest farmhouse I had purchased 2 years earlier on the outskirts of town. This property, with its expansive kitchen garden and renovated barn studio, had become my personal sanctuary away from business operations. Few people had been invited here, making her request particularly meaningful. I prepared a simple meal of comfort foods from her childhood: my grandmother's arroz con pollo, fresh bread, and the citrus flan that had always been Alexandra's favorite. No elaborate presentation, no business calls interrupted, just authentic food and an environment conducive to honest conversation. Alexandra arrived carrying a large portfolio case, her expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability that reminded me of her younger self preparing for school art shows. She set the case aside carefully as we embraced. "Thank you for having me over," she said, taking in the cozy kitchen with its hanging copper pots and open shelving filled with ceramics collected from local artisans. "This place suits you. I can't believe this is the first time I'm seeing it." "That's partly my fault," I acknowledged, gesturing for her to sit while I served our meal. "I've kept this place somewhat separate from my business life, but it's also because you've been increasingly distant, even before the engagement." She nodded, accepting both observations without defense. "That's actually why I brought this," she said, indicating the portfolio. "I want to show you something, but let's eat first. This smells amazing." Throughout dinner, our conversation remained careful but genuine. Alexandra shared details about her final projects at university. I updated her on Maria's daughter's college acceptances, and we reminisced about the time we accidentally delivered a wedding cake to the wrong venue and had to create a replacement in record time. Small talk, perhaps, but without the artificial polish that had characterized our recent interactions. After dinner, as we settled in the living room with coffee, Alexandra finally opened her portfolio. Inside were dozens of sketches, photographs, and design boards, a comprehensive chronicle of her 4 years at university. "This is my complete portfolio," she explained, carefully arranging the materials on the coffee table. "But there's something specific I want you to see." She pulled out a bound project book titled Foundations, a visual exploration of heritage and identity. As I opened it, I found myself looking at a sophisticated visual narrative about our family journey. Photographs of my grandmother's hands preparing traditional dishes alongside images of my early catering setups. Sketches of our first apartment juxtaposed with architectural drawings of Hillcrest Hall. Candid shots of us working side by side in the kitchen, paired with formal images of Alexandra's university exhibitions. "This was my senior thesis project," she explained quietly. "I've been documenting our story for years. Your journey from single mother with nothing to successful entrepreneur. My childhood immersed in building something meaningful. The values that shaped both our lives." I turned pages slowly, absorbing the thoughtful composition, the evident care and pride in her documentation of our shared history. "It's beautiful, Alexandra. But I don't understand. If you created this, how could you also be ashamed of me, of our background?" Her eyes filled with tears. "That's what I've been trying to understand myself. When I was working on this project in my studio, I felt completely centered, proud of every aspect of our story. But then I'd go to social events with Connor's friends, or meetings with his parents, and suddenly I'd feel this pressure to be someone else, someone more polished, with a different kind of history." She took a shaky breath before continuing. "It was like I developed 2 separate identities. The authentic Alexandra who created this portfolio and values everything you built, And this other version who was willing to hide her mother to impress. People whose approval shouldn't matter. Her honesty touched me deeply. That kind of compartmentalization is more common than you might think, I told her. I've seen many successful people struggle with imposter syndrome or feeling trapped between worlds. The challenge is recognizing it and choosing which self is real. That's exactly it, she agreed, relief evident in her expression. After what happened at Harrington Manor, I spent hours thinking about which version of myself I want to be. The one who denies her roots for social acceptance, or the one who draws strength from them. She turned to a particular page in her portfolio showing a photograph of us at Hillcrest Hall during early renovations, both covered in dust, but beaming, with pride beside a restored fireplace. This is the real me. The person who understands that creating something meaningful requires getting your hands dirty, that authentic success comes from vision and perseverance, not from presenting some perfect facade. This moment of clarity from Alexandra moved me profoundly, but I knew from experience that insights require reinforcement to create lasting change. Understanding the pattern is an important first step, I acknowledged, but breaking it will take consistent choices, especially when you're around influences that pull you toward that other version of yourself. She nodded soberly. Connor's family isn't going to change their values overnight, or maybe ever. I need to figure out how to maintain my authentic self around them without creating unnecessary conflict. That's wisdom beyond your years, I told her, genuinely impressed by her maturity. Finding that balance is exactly the challenge, not compromising your values while still finding ways to connect across differences. Our conversation continued late into the evening, exploring nuances of identity, social pressure, and the courage required to remain authentic across different environments. Before she left, Alexandra asked if she could bring Connor to the farmhouse the following weekend. Not with his parents, just the two of them. I want him to see this side of my life, the part I've been hiding, she explained. If we're going to build a genuine partnership, he needs to understand what really matters to me. That request gave me hope that Alexandra was serious about integration rather than compartmentalization, about bringing the fragmented pieces of her life into alignment rather than maintaining separate personas for different audiences. Connor's visit to the farmhouse proved revelatory in ways neither Alexandra nor I anticipated. He arrived somewhat stiff and formal, clearly uncertain what to expect. I had deliberately planned an interactive experience rather than formal entertaining, a cooking lesson using vegetables harvested from my garden that morning. I hope you don't mind getting your hands dirty, I said, handing him an apron as we entered the kitchen. Alexandra tells me you've never made pasta from scratch. His discomfort was initially evident as he awkwardly handled eggs and flour, attempting to maintain a pristine appearance despite the inherently messy process. But something shifted as we worked together, Alexandra guiding him through techniques she had learned in childhood. His genuine delight when successfully rolling out his first sheet of pasta revealed a more relaxed, accessible person beneath the polished exterior. Over dinner, featuring the slightly irregular but proudly handmade pasta, Connor opened up about his own family pressures and expectations. He was the third generation expected to enter politics, following his father and grandfather, despite his greater interest in architectural preservation. My father doesn't understand why I would want to restore old buildings when I could be shaping policy, he admitted. He sees my architectural interests as a hobby at best, a distraction from my real career path at worst. That sounds familiar, I observed. Living according to others' expectations rather than your authentic interests. Connor looked thoughtful. I never made that connection before, but you're right. I've been doing exactly what I accused Alexandra of, compartmentalizing parts of myself to meet others' expectations. This vulnerable exchange marked a turning point in my relationship with Connor. Beyond the polite facade lay a young man struggling with similar authenticity challenges, albeit from a different perspective. His willingness to acknowledge this created an opening for genuine connection rather than the performative politeness that had characterized our previous interactions. Before they left that evening, Connor asked thoughtfully, "Would it be possible for me to see Harrington Manor again? Not as a wedding venue, but to understand the restoration work you did there. The architectural details you preserved are remarkable." His sincere interest in my work, not as Alexandra's mother or a useful venue owner, but as a skilled preservationist, suggested he might be more capable of transcending his family's social prejudices than I had initially assumed. The subsequent weeks brought gradual but meaningful shifts in our wedding planning dynamic. Alexandra insisted on regular planning sessions at my home rather than the Blackwell estate, deliberately creating space where her authentic self could flourish. She requested my professional input on menu development, not just as her mother, but as an experienced caterer with valuable insights. Most significantly, she arranged a private dinner with both sets of parents, a brave attempt to bridge worlds that had initially seemed incompatible. I hosted at my farmhouse rather than any of my commercial properties, a choice that Alexandra later explained was deliberate. "I wanted them to see you in your personal space, not just as a successful business owner, but as a real person with taste, warmth, and substance." The dinner proved predictably awkward at first. Elizabeth Blackwell clearly felt out of her element in my country kitchen, making stilted observations about the charming rustic setting with the faint condescension of someone unused to environments without formal service staff. Richard maintained his politician's affability, but seemed constantly distracted, checking his phone when he thought no one was watching. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through food, specifically my grandmother's traditional recipes presented, with stories of their origins and cultural significance. As I described learning to make sofrito from my grandmother, who had worked as a hotel housekeeper after immigrating with nothing but determination and hope, Elizabeth's practiced social mask softened slightly. "My grandmother was a telephone operator," she offered unexpectedly. "She worked night shifts so my mother could attend private school during the day." The Blackwell name came later, through marriage. This small revelation, that the Blackwells' social position might be more recently acquired than their current lifestyle suggested, created a tiny crack in the facade of inherited privilege they projected. Richard, perhaps sensing an opportunity to connect with potential voters, a cynical assessment perhaps, but likely accurate, began asking thoughtful questions about my business development approach. "Self-made success stories resonate deeply with Americans," he observed, his political instincts evident even in personal conversation. "Your journey from single mother to successful entrepreneur embodies the kind of determination voters admire. Alexandra tells us you never took shortcuts or compromised your standards, even when it would have been expedient." "Values aren't situational," I replied simply. "Integrity means maintaining the same standards whether anyone's watching or not. That's something I've always tried to teach Alexandra." Connor, who had been quietly observing the adults' careful navigation, suddenly spoke with unexpected conviction. "That's exactly what I admire about both Alexandra and Ms. Rivera. They understand that genuine quality comes from consistent standards and authentic vision, not from whatever happens to be fashionable at the moment." His comment, directing equal respect toward both Alexandra and me, demonstrated a perceptiveness I hadn't fully appreciated before. Elizabeth shot her son a surprised glance, perhaps recognizing a backbone she hadn't realized he possessed. The evening didn't transform into some fairy tale of instant family harmony, but it established a foundation of cautious, mutual recognition. The Blackwells' worldview likely remained largely intact, but they had at least been exposed to an alternative perspective on success and substance, one grounded in genuine achievement rather than social performance. After they left, Alexandra stayed behind to help clean up, working alongside me with the easy synchronicity we had developed during years of catering events together. "That was better than I expected," she admitted, carefully wrapping leftover desserts. "They didn't exactly embrace everything about our background, but they seem to at least recognize your accomplishments. Recognition isn't the goal, I reminded her gently. The point was to establish that you don't need to compartmentalize your life, that you can be proud of your background while moving into this new chapter. She nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that a lot. The wedding itself is just one day. What matters more is the life Connor and I create afterward, whether we build something based on authentic values or get caught up in appearances and expectations. That's profoundly true, I agreed, and it's a choice you'll need to make. Repeatedly, not just once. The wedding planning that unfolded over subsequent weeks reflected Alexandra's growing commitment to authenticity over performance. She met with my catering team to develop a menu that honored both families' traditions while maintaining the quality standards Rivera Catering was known for. She selected music that reflected personal significance rather than conventional wedding playlists. She carefully pruned the guest list to include people with genuine connections to their lives rather than the political network the Blackwells had initially proposed. Each of these choices represented small victories in Alexandra's journey toward integration, toward becoming someone who could navigate different social contexts without sacrificing her core identity and values. Perhaps the most meaningful development came 6 weeks before the wedding, when Alexandra invited me to accompany her to select her dress, an outing I had assumed would include Elizabeth Blackwell rather than me. Connor's mother offered to take me to her designer in New York, Alexandra explained as we drove to a small, well-respected local boutique. But I realized I'd be uncomfortable the entire time, trying to meet her expectations rather than finding something that truly feels right for me. The boutique owner, Sophia, had catered her own daughter's wedding through my company years earlier. She greeted us warmly, immediately establishing an atmosphere of genuine service rather than pretentious exclusivity. Alexandra has explained what she's looking for, Sophia told me as she brought out several gowns. Something that honors tradition while feeling authentic to her personal style. Elegant, but not ostentatious. As Alexandra tried on different dresses, I was transported back to countless moments throughout her childhood. Her first day of kindergarten when she insisted on selecting her own outfit. Middle school art presentations where she carefully chose clothing that would allow her to work comfortably while still looking presentable. High school graduation where she had paired a traditional cap and gown with handcrafted jewelry that expressed her creative identity. When she emerged in a simply cut gown with architectural details that highlighted her slender frame, we both knew immediately it was perfect. The dress featured exquisite craftsmanship without flashy embellishments, timeless elegance rather than trendy details that would look dated in photographs years later. "You look beautiful," I told her, emotion making my voice unsteady. "Completely yourself, but elevated for the occasion." She turned slowly before the mirror, a peaceful confidence in her expression I hadn't seen in years. That's exactly how I feel in this, like myself, but on my most important day. The price tag was substantial, but far less than what the Blackwells' New York designer would have charged. When I reached for my credit card, Alexandra stopped me. "I'd like to pay for this myself," she said quietly. "I've been saving from my graphic design freelancing throughout college. This feels like an important investment in starting my marriage authentically." Her decision to use her own earned money rather than either family's funds symbolized the independence and self-reliance I had always tried to instill in her. More importantly, it represented her taking ownership of her choices rather than defaulting to either family's expectations. As our wedding preparations continued, I observed Alexandra navigating the complex dance of honoring both families' traditions and expectations while maintaining her own vision. She included Elizabeth in appropriate aspects of planning while politely but firmly declining suggestions that didn't align with her values. She found thoughtful ways to incorporate Blackwell family traditions without surrendering her own identity in the process. This careful balancing became most evident during the wedding rehearsal dinner, traditionally hosted by the groom's family. The Blackwells had selected an exclusive country club, precisely the kind of environment where Alexandra had previously felt compelled to present a carefully curated version of herself. Walking into that space beside my daughter, I prepared myself for her to potentially slip back into the pattern of subtle distancing we had worked to overcome. Instead, she surprised me by deliberately introducing me to each guest, not just as my mother, but with specific references to my professional accomplishments and personal contributions to her life. This is my mother, Elena Rivera, who built Rivera Catering and restored Harrington Manor, she would say. Or, Mom taught me everything I know about creating meaningful experiences through food and environment design. Each introduction represented a public declaration that she was no longer compartmentalizing her life or minimizing aspects of her background that didn't fit the Blackwells' social narrative. More importantly, her evident pride seemed entirely genuine rather than performative. She had found her way back to authentically valuing the journey we had shared. Elizabeth Blackwell observed these interactions with a complex expression, part surprise, part reassessment. During a quiet moment when we found ourselves alone at the bar waiting for drinks, she made an observation that revealed more personal growth than I had expected from her. "Alexandra speaks about you with such admiration," she noted, carefully selecting a canapé from a passing tray. "It reminds me of how I felt about my grandmother, the one who worked as a telephone operator. I was proud of her determination, though I admit I sometimes minimized that part of our family history in certain social circles." The candor of this admission surprised me. "We all have complicated relationships with our backgrounds," I acknowledged. "The challenge is recognizing what's truly valuable versus what just seems impressive in the moment." She nodded thoughtfully. "Richard's family has been in politics for generations, which creates certain expectations about maintaining appearances. Sometimes I wonder if we've sacrificed substance for surface along the way." This unexpected moment of vulnerability from a woman who had initially dismissed me as socially inadequate demonstrated that growth and reassessment were possible even in the most seemingly rigid perspectives. While I harbored no illusions that Elizabeth and I would become close friends, this exchange suggested she might at least be capable of seeing beyond her social prejudices to recognize authentic value. The night before the wedding, Alexandra asked if she could stay at my farmhouse rather than at the hotel with the other members of the wedding party, a request that touched me deeply. As we sat on the porch swing after dinner, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, she leaned her head against my shoulder just as she had done as a child. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said quietly. "Even when I was rejecting everything you taught me, trying to be someone else to impress. People whose opinions shouldn't have mattered more than yours." "That's what unconditional love means," I told her, stroking her hair gently. "Seeing who someone truly is, even when they temporarily lose sight of it themselves." She was quiet for a moment before asking, "How did you always stay so clear about who you are? Even when clients or social circles might have pressured you to present yourself differently?" The question made me reflect on my own journey. "I'm not sure I was always as clear as you think," I admitted. "There were moments, especially early in building the business, when I felt that pull to pretend to be more conventional or traditionally credentialed than I was. The difference was that I recognized those impulses as fear rather than aspiration. Fear of not being taken seriously, fear of being judged as inadequate. What helped you move past that fear?" "Remembering my purpose," I said simply. "Every time I felt tempted to present myself as something I wasn't, I'd remember that I was building something authentic, a business based on genuine quality and integrity, and a life that would allow you opportunities without compromising core values." Alexandra nodded against my shoulder. "I think that's what got confused for me at university. I lost sight of purpose beyond social acceptance, but working on the wedding these past weeks has reminded me what really matters: creating experiences with meaning and substance, not just impressive appearances. As darkness settled fully around us, crickets adding their chorus to the peaceful evening, I recognized that this conversation represented the true success of our journey together. Beyond the business empire I had built, beyond the prestigious education Alexandra had received, we had found our way back to shared values and mutual respect, to understanding that genuine achievement is measured not by external validation, but by alignment with our deepest principles. Tomorrow, Alexandra would walk down the aisle at Harrington Manor, not as someone trying to impress the social elite, but as a young woman grounded in authentic identity while embracing new beginnings. And I would watch this transition not from the sidelines as initially planned, but from my rightful place as mother of the bride, as the woman whose journey from struggling single mother to successful entrepreneur had laid the foundation for everything this celebration represented. The manor I had lovingly restored would provide the perfect setting for this moment of truth and transition, its history honored rather than erased, its beauty enhanced rather than fabricated, its authentic character celebrated rather than disguised. Like Alexandra herself, Harrington Manor represented the perfect integration of honoring origins while embracing future possibilities. The morning of Alexandra's wedding dawned with a clarity that seemed symbolic. The sky washed clean by an overnight shower, sunlight filtering through dissipating clouds to cast Harrington Manor in a golden glow. I'd been awake since dawn, not from wedding day anxiety, but from a sense of peaceful anticipation. Before heading to the manor, I walked through my garden, gathering fresh herbs and flowers for a special tea blend I'd created for Alexandra on significant days throughout her life. In the kitchen, as I steeped the aromatic mixture of chamomile, mint, and orange blossoms, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this day. Not just the recent months of reconciliation, but the entire path we had traveled together, from those desperate early days after Chris left, through years of building a business one catering job at a time, to this moment of transition and new beginnings. I poured the fragrant tea into a thermos and packed it alongside a small breakfast for Alexandra and her bridesmaids. This wasn't part of the official catering plan. It was simply a mother's gesture, continuing a tradition that had sustained us through many challenges and celebrations over the years. Arriving at Harrington Manor 2 hours before the first vendors were scheduled, I found Marcus already overseeing preparations with quiet efficiency. Though I had deliberately stepped back from operational management of the venue after our confrontation with the Blackwells, allowing Alexandra to work with the staff as any other bride would, I still felt a deep connection to every corner of this property. "Everything is proceeding exactly to plan, Ms. Rivera," Marcus reported as we walked through the ballroom where chairs were being arranged for the ceremony. "The florist arrives at 9, catering team at 10, string quartet for setup at 11. Weather forecast remains clear through the evening." "Thank you, Marcus. You've handled everything beautifully." I paused, admiring how morning light streamed through the tall windows I had personally selected during renovations. "I'd like to prepare the bridal suite myself, if you don't mind." He nodded understanding. "Of course." The room has been cleaned as requested, with all regular furnishings in place. The special items you sent over yesterday have been delivered as well. Those special items represented another aspect of intentional tradition, a collection of meaningful objects I had gathered to surround Alexandra on her wedding day. Not luxury branded products or conventional, something borrowed trinkets, but authentic touchstones of her journey. The first professional knife set I had purchased. When Rivera Catering moved beyond our home kitchen, a small framed sketch she had drawn at age 7 of the two of us cooking together. A hand-woven table runner my grandmother had brought from her homeland, used at every significant family celebration throughout Alexandra's childhood. In the bridal suite, I arranged these items thoughtfully, creating an environment that would remind Alexandra of her foundations, even as she prepared to begin this new chapter. I added the breakfast and tea to a small side table, along with a handwritten note expressing not just my love, but my profound respect for the woman she had become. Someone who had faced challenging truths about herself and chosen authenticity over appearances. As I finished these preparations, I heard voices in the hallway, Alexandra arriving with her closest friends, earlier than expected. I opened the door to find my daughter, still in casual clothes with her hair loosely tied, back, carrying her wedding dress in a garment bag over one shoulder and laughing at something her childhood friend Mia had said. The moment she saw me, her expression softened from amusement to something deeper. "Mom, you're already here. I should have known you'd beat us all." "Just putting some finishing touches on your preparation space," I explained, stepping aside, to let her enter. "I can leave if you'd prefer time alone with your friends." "Don't you dare," she said firmly, handing the dress to Mia and embracing me. "You're exactly who I want here right now." The next 2 hours unfolded with a natural harmony that felt like a return to our best times together. While the professional, hair and makeup artists worked their magic, Alexandra and her friends enjoyed the breakfast I'd brought. She insisted I stay throughout the preparations, sometimes catching my eye in the mirror with a smile that communicated volumes about her comfort with having me fully present in this important moment. When the stylist finished arranging Alexandra's hair in an elegant updo, my daughter reached for the small velvet box containing my grandmother's pearl bracelet. "Could you help me with this, Mom? I'd like to put it on before the dress." As I fastened the delicate clasp around her wrist, I was transported across generations. My grandmother wearing these pearls when she left her homeland to build a new life in America. My mother adding the sapphire clasp as her contribution to the family legacy. Me wearing it at my own wedding and now passing it to Alexandra. Each woman had faced different challenges, but all had demonstrated the same core resilience and determination to create meaningful lives on their own terms. "Perfect," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Something old, something blue, and something that carries the strength of all the women who came before you." Alexandra touched the pearls reverently. "I've been thinking about them, about Grandma and Great-Grandma. Neither of them had easy lives, but they never compromised who they were, did they?" "Never," I confirmed. "They faced discrimination, financial hardship, and countless obstacles, but they maintained their dignity and values throughout. That's the true inheritance they left us. Not objects, but examples of living with integrity regardless of circumstances." As the preparations continued, I observed a profound difference in Alexandra compared to recent months. Gone was the slight tension she had carried when trying to present herself according to Blackwell expectations. Instead, she moved with the natural grace of someone completely comfortable in her own skin, making choices based on what felt genuinely right rather than what might impress others. When Connor's mother arrived to present Alexandra with a family hairpin, a tradition for Blackwell brides, I watched carefully for any sign that Alexandra might slip back into performance mode. Instead, she received Elizabeth's gift with gracious appreciation while maintaining her authentic self, neither exaggerating her response to impress her future mother-in-law, nor diminishing the gesture's significance. "Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm honored to incorporate this into my look today," she said sincerely, then added with gentle confidence, "I think it will complement my grandmother's pearls beautifully." That simple acknowledgement, placing the Blackwell heirloom and Rivera family treasure on equal footing, demonstrated how far Alexandra had come in integrating the different aspects of her identity. Elizabeth registered this subtle assertion, with a slight raise of her eyebrows, but then nodded in what appeared to be genuine respect. "Family traditions from both sides should certainly be honored," she conceded, her tone warmer than I had ever heard it. "After all, Connor is marrying into your family just as you are marrying into ours." This small exchange, conducted with mutual dignity rather than social posturing, gave me hope that the future relationship between our families might evolve beyond superficial tolerance toward genuine respect. The path would likely include continued, challenges and adjustments. But Alexandra was establishing healthy boundaries from the beginning rather than compromising her identity to gain approval. When the time came for Alexandra to don her wedding dress, she asked everyone except me to step out briefly. As I helped her with the delicate buttons running down the back, she met my eyes in the mirror. "I needed this moment with just you," she explained. "To remember that everything I'm becoming builds on the foundation you created. Not just financial security or educational opportunities, but the example you set of defining success on your own terms." Smoothing the elegant fabric over her shoulders, I felt a surge of pride more profound than any business achievement had ever produced. "You've taken that foundation and built something uniquely yours, Alexandra. The strength I see in you now isn't just echoing mine, it's distinctly your own." She turned to face me fully, the simple architectural lines of the gown highlighting her natural beauty without artifice or excessive embellishment. "I want you to know something before we go downstairs. Whatever happens with the Blackwells in the future, whatever social circles Connor and I navigate, I will never again compromise who I am or where I came from. That's my promise to you and to myself." The conviction in her voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. This wasn't the impulsive declaration of someone caught in an emotional moment, but the considered commitment of a young woman who had confronted her own weaknesses and chosen a different path forward. "That's the greatest gift you could give me today," I told her honestly. "Better than any mother of the bride recognition or social acknowledgement." When Alexandra was fully ready, radiant in her carefully chosen gown with both family heirlooms incorporated into her appearance, I excused myself to prepare for my own role in the ceremony. As mother of the bride, tradition would have me escorted to my seat by one of Connor's relatives, but Alexandra had adjusted this protocol to honor our unique family structure. "I'd like you to walk down the aisle just before me," she had explained, during planning. "Not escorted by anyone, but walking independently as the strong woman who raised me. Then my father will escort me, acknowledging his role while still respecting that you were my primary parent." This thoughtful adaptation demonstrated Alexandra's growing ability to honor traditions while confidently modifying them to reflect authentic relationships rather than social conventions. Chris, who had reconnected with Alexandra during her college years and would be attending with his new family, had readily agreed to this arrangement, acknowledging that his role had been secondary to mine throughout her upbringing. Wearing a tailored dress in a deep teal shade, selected for its elegance rather than conventional mother-of-the-bride expectations, I waited at the entrance to the ceremony space. The string quartet played softly, guests settled into their seats, and I observed with quiet satisfaction how beautifully everything had come together. The floral arrangements reflected Alexandra's artistic sensibility rather than trendy wedding aesthetics, incorporating both cultivated blooms and wildflowers that grew naturally on the manor grounds. The lighting had been designed to highlight the room's historic architecture while creating a warm, intimate atmosphere despite the grand space. Every detail expressed thoughtful intention rather than ostentatious display. Richard Blackwell approached. As I stood waiting, his politician's smile tempered by what appeared to be genuine goodwill. "Elena, everything looks magnificent. You've created a truly special environment here." "Thank you, Richard. That was always my vision for Harrington Manor, preserving its historical significance while making it a space where meaningful celebrations could unfold." He nodded, his expression more thoughtful than I had previously observed. "I've been reflecting on our conversation at your home, about maintaining consistent values rather than situational standards. It's made me reconsider some aspects of how I've approached both politics and family life. While I maintained healthy skepticism about the depth of his self-reflection, I appreciated the effort at authentic connection. That's all any of us can do, continually examine our choices and adjust when we recognize disconnections between our stated values and actual behaviors." "Indeed." He hesitated, then added with surprising honesty, I want you to know that while Elizabeth and I may have initially had reservations about Alexandra's background, we've come to recognize that she brings strengths to this union that our social circle often lacks. Connor has become more grounded, more certain of his own mind, since knowing her. I believe that comes directly from the foundation you built. This acknowledgement that Alexandra's upbringing had positively influenced their son rather than representing a social liability revealed significant evolution in the Blackwells' perspective. Whether motivated by genuine growth or pragmatic acceptance, it created opening for healthier family dynamics moving forward. As the music shifted, signaling the ceremony's beginning, I prepared for my walk down the aisle. Connor's groomsmen and Alexandra's bridesmaids processed in pairs, followed by Connor and his parents. Then came my moment, walking independently, head held high, embodying the self-reliance and dignity that had characterized my journey as both business builder and mother. Guests from both families watched as I moved confidently toward the front row, some from the Blackwells' circle perhaps seeing me truly for the first time, not as a social climber to be dismissed or a useful connection to be leveraged, but as a woman whose accomplishments and character had earned respect on their own merits. Taking my place, I turned to watch Alexandra enter on her father's arm. The collective intake of breath from the assembled guests affirmed what I already knew, that she looked beautiful, not because of expensive trappings or elaborate styling, but because she radiated the unmistakable glow of someone fully aligned with her authentic self. As she joined Connor at the altar, their expressions reflected genuine connection rather than performance for their audience. The ceremony they had written together balanced time-honored traditions with personal touchstones, including vows they had composed individually that spoke to partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than social expectations or conventional roles. I promise to build our life together with the same integrity and determination my mother taught me, Alexandra stated clearly, her voice carrying throughout the room. To create a home where authenticity is valued above appearances, where we can both become our best selves without pretense or performance. Connor's answering vows revealed dimensions of thoughtfulness I hadn't fully appreciated before. I promise to honor not just who you are today, but the journey that shaped you. To remember that true strength comes from embracing our complete stories rather than presenting edited versions to please others. Each commitment felt rooted in hard-earned wisdom rather than romantic platitudes, suggesting they had engaged in meaningful reflection about the foundation they wanted for their marriage. As they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, I found myself genuinely hopeful about their future together, not because of Connor's family connections or career prospects, but because they seemed to have found authentic alignment in their values and aspirations. The reception that followed in Harrington Manor's grand ballroom reflected the same integration of genuine significance over social performance. My catering team had executed a menu that honored both families' traditions while maintaining the highest standards of quality and presentation. The historical photographs Alexandra had incorporated into the decor told the story of both families with equal respect, celebrating accomplishments without glossing over challenges. As mother of the bride, tradition called for me to deliver a toast following the father of the bride and best man. When my turn came, I stood with the quiet confidence that had become my hallmark throughout decades of building a business from nothing. When Alexandra was 7 years old, I began. She came home from school upset because a classmate had made comments about our apartment being smaller than other children's homes. I sat her down at our kitchen table, the same table where we developed recipes that would eventually become Rivera Catering's signature dishes, and told her something I'd like to share with all of you today. I paused, making eye contact with guests from both families before continuing. True success isn't measured by square footage or social approval. It's built daily through vision, integrity, and the courage to remain authentic even when that path is more challenging. Alexandra and Connor, may your marriage embody this deeper definition of success, creating a life rich in meaning rather than merely in appearances. Raising my glass, I concluded, to building something that lasts because its foundation is genuine. The response from guests surpassed polite reception. Many nodded in thoughtful agreement, suggesting the message had resonated beyond conventional wedding toast expectations. Even Elizabeth Blackwell, initially so concerned with social propriety, appeared moved by the authentic sentiment. Throughout the evening, I observed Alexandra and Connor navigating their celebration with remarkable balance, showing appropriate respect to both families while maintaining the standards and preferences they had established together. Alexandra introduced me to Connor's extended family without hesitation or qualification, proudly explaining my role in creating both the venue and the catering experience they were enjoying. My mother taught me everything I know about creating meaningful environments and experiences, she would say, or, this restoration project was entirely Mom's vision. She saw the potential in this property when others couldn't imagine its transformation. Each introduction represented not just reconciliation between us, but Alexandra's complete integration of her identity, no longer compartmentalizing different aspects of her background or minimizing elements that didn't fit conventional success narratives. As the celebration continued into the evening, a moment of unexpected connection unfolded when I found myself beside Elizabeth during a quiet moment on the terrace. She had stepped outside between dances, perhaps seeking a break from the energetic reception. "Elena?" she acknowledged with a small nod. "I must compliment you again on this remarkable property. The restoration maintains historical integrity while incorporating modern elements so seamlessly." "Thank you, Elizabeth. That balance was intentional, honoring origins while embracing present purpose." She seemed to consider this principle beyond its architectural application. Rather like what we're attempting as families, I suppose. Honoring where we've come from while creating something new together. The insight surprised me, suggesting greater depth than her polished social persona had previously revealed. Exactly. That. Both require respecting authentic foundations rather than fabricating convenient narratives. "I've been thinking about narratives," she admitted, her gaze following a pair of guests strolling through the garden below. "The stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what matters. Richard and I have spent decades cultivating a particular image, making choices based on how they would be perceived, rather than whether they reflected our genuine values. This unexpected vulnerability created an opening for authentic connection I hadn't anticipated. That pattern is surprisingly easy to fall into," I acknowledged. "We all have moments of choosing appearance over substance. The challenge is recognizing when we've drifted from our authentic center." "Alexandra seems remarkably centered for someone her age," Elizabeth observed. "Especially considering the social pressures of the university environment and, yes, I'll acknowledge it, the expectations Richard and I initially imposed." "She lost her way temporarily," I said, "but found her path back. That's the true test of character. Not avoiding mistakes, but having the courage to correct course when we recognize we've taken a wrong turn." Elizabeth turned to face me directly, her social mask temporarily set aside. "I owe you an apology, Elena. My initial assessment of you was based on shallow assumptions about success and social standing. Watching you these past months, how you've built this business, raised Alexandra, conducted yourself with consistent dignity, has been genuinely educational." The apology, offered without qualification or expectation, demonstrated significant growth on Elizabeth's part. "I appreciate that, Elizabeth. Perhaps we can move forward with better understanding between us." "I would like that," she replied with surprising sincerity. "For Connor and Alexandra's sake, of course, but also because I find I have things to learn from your perspective." As we rejoined the celebration inside, I reflected on how this wedding had transcended its original purpose. Beyond uniting Alexandra and Connor, It had created unexpected bridges between families from different worlds, demonstrating that authentic connection was possible across social divides when approached with genuine openness rather than protective pretense. Later, as Alexandra and Connor prepared for their departure amid the traditional sparkler send-off, my daughter pulled me aside for one final private moment. In the small library where our confrontation had initially unfolded months earlier, she embraced me with the uninhibited affection I remembered from her childhood. "Thank you for everything. Not just today, but for every day you showed me what it means to live with purpose and integrity," she whispered. I lost sight of those lessons for a while, but they were always there, waiting for me to remember. "The most important learning isn't linear," I told her, smoothing a strand of hair that had escaped her elegant updo. "Sometimes we need to step away from wisdom before we can truly embrace it as our own." She pulled back slightly, meeting my gaze with clear-eyed certainty. "I've been thinking about what's next, beyond the honeymoon and setting up our new home. I want to create something meaningful with my design skills, something that honors the entrepreneurial spirit you taught me." "You have everything you need to build whatever you envision," I assured her. "The practical skills, the creative talent, and most importantly, the understanding that genuine success comes from alignment with your deepest values." As we rejoined the guests for the final farewell, I watched Alexandra and Connor run through the corridor of sparkler light toward their future. Not perfect people, certainly, but two young adults who had faced important truths about themselves and chosen authenticity over appearance, substance over surface. In that moment of transition, surrounded by the beauty of Harrington Manor, the tangible manifestation of my own journey from desperate beginning to hard-earned success, I felt a sense of completion that transcended any business achievement. The true legacy I would leave wasn't measured in properties acquired or wealth accumulated, but in this living example of resilience, integrity, and the courage to remain authentic even when that path proved challenging. Alexandra turned at the vintage car waiting to transport them, catching my eye one final time. Her smile contained everything I needed to know, that she understood the deeper gifts she carried forward, beyond material inheritance or social connection. She was taking with her the capacity to build a life defined by genuine purpose rather than external validation, to create success measured by integrity rather than appearances. And that, I realized as I watched the car disappear down the winding drive of Harrington Manor, was the most valuable asset I could possibly have given her, one that neither financial setback nor social pressure could ever diminish. Like the manor itself, Alexandra's future would be built on authentic foundations, honoring origins while confidently embracing new possibilities. 2 years after the wedding, I stood in the newly renovated storefront that housed Foundations, Alexandra and Connor's joint venture combining her design expertise with his unexpected pivot from political science to architectural preservation. The space perfectly expressed their shared vision, historically significant elements carefully restored alongside contemporary additions, creating an environment that felt both timeless and freshly relevant. "What do you think, Mom?" Alexandra asked, watching as I examined the thoughtfully arranged displays of their preservation-focused design services. "We incorporated many of the principles you taught me about honoring authentic character while adapting for current purpose." "It's perfect," I told her honestly. "You've created something that expresses your unique vision while building on solid foundations." Connor joined us, carrying architectural plans for their latest restoration project, an abandoned community center they were transforming into affordable studio spaces for local artists. "We couldn't have done this without your example, Elena," he acknowledged, "both the practical business guidance and the philosophy behind it." What struck me most powerfully was not just their professional success, but the authentic partnership they had created. Connor had ultimately declined his father's political connections, choosing instead to pursue his genuine passion for preservation. Richard had initially been dismayed, but gradually came to respect his son's determination to define success on his own terms. a evolution influenced, I suspected, by our ongoing family interactions. As Alexandra led me through their completed projects portfolio, I recognized that she had not only reclaimed her authentic self, but had built something even stronger, an integrated identity that honored her background while confidently moving forward. She no longer compartmentalized different aspects of her life or adjusted her presentation for different audiences. Instead, she moved through diverse environments with consistent authenticity, comfortable in professional settings with the Blackwell's social connections and equally at ease directing construction crews at renovation sites. "We're expanding next year," she explained excitedly, adding a nonprofit foundation to support preservation projects in underserved communities. "We want to demonstrate that architectural heritage belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford to maintain historic properties." This vision, extending opportunity to others rather than guarding privilege, represented the values I had tried to instill throughout her upbringing. That she and Connor had found shared purpose in creating access rather than exclusivity gave me profound hope for their future together. As I prepared to leave, Alexandra walked me to my car. "I've been meaning to tell you something," she said, her expression thoughtful. "Elizabeth mentioned that she's been recommending Rivera Catering to her foundation boards, not as a favor to family, but because she genuinely believes in your standards and approach. This development, while surprising, confirmed my observations about Elizabeth's evolving perspective. Our relationship remained more cordial than close, but a foundation of mutual respect had gradually replaced the initial social prejudice and defensiveness. Sometimes people can grow beyond our initial expectations of them, I observed, if we give them the opportunity." Alexandra smiled, understanding the broader application of this principle. "Like you did with me, even when I was rejecting everything you taught me." I embraced her before departing, this accomplished young woman who had journeyed through challenge and misstep to find authentic alignment with her values and potential. As I drove away from Foundations, both the business she had created and the principles it represented, I reflected on the true meaning of success in a life's journey. My path from desperate single mother to successful entrepreneur had never been about accumulating wealth or property for their own sake. It had always been about creating something meaningful, something built on integrity rather than appearance. Harrington Manor, Rivera Catering, and my other business achievements were significant not because they represented financial security or social recognition, but because they embodied consistent values expressed through purposeful work. Alexandra had ultimately embraced those same principles, not as inherited obligations, but as personally validated truths. She had discovered through her own experience that genuine fulfillment comes not from external validation or social acceptance, but from creating a life aligned with authentic purpose and values. That knowledge, more valuable than any property or business I could possibly leave her, was the true inheritance she would carry forward. And watching her share it with Connor, building their partnership on this foundation of authenticity rather than appearance, gave me confidence that whatever challenges they faced, they would navigate them with the wisdom to distinguish between what merely looks impressive and what genuinely matters. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.